We're no longer, it's not really the town square where there's only like a couple people there having a discussion. This is global now.
What do you think is the most conducive way to address your frustrations to me, who honestly wasn't my fault whatsoever?
Hey, this is racism of low expectations. You don't think that I'm capable of achieving these things, and therefore you give me preferential treatment. I'd be pissed too.
That's where empathy falls off for some people, because they say, boo-hoo, you're white, you have it easy.
You may not change one person's mind, but through that discussion, you could change 100 people's minds.
And nobody's going to take your side after one debate.
No, not at all. And I think that maybe coddling people and, trying to give people a pillow to land on, like, might actually be detrimental to their progress.
You could either let it control your life, or you could take control and use it to strengthen your position, So, like, take the power out of the aggression. Welcome to another Kitchen Sink Microscopy. I'm Casey Rochford, and we would love it if you would like and share the video, because sharing's caring, and then subscribing to the video, because subscribing is passionate sex, and that's even better.
Oh, wow. Well, how do I follow up with that? I mean, I'm Eric Rosenblatt. I'm Polly, and don't forget that we write our own music, so stick around to the end of the show to hear something new, whatever it is that we're going to include today. And God, I need a haircut. Damn, my hair is crazy, but it's the wintertime. Anyway.
It's like a video Tinder ad all of a sudden.
Yeah, so if I didn't mention it, go to patreon.com/KSMVidcast. You can pick up the music and help support the channel. That would be awesome. We'd really like it, because we are perpetually demonetized here on YouTube. Controversy, y'all. What should we talk about today, Casey?
Well, we're getting down to the end of season 1 here. And I thought it would be good to talk about something that's kind of a central philosophy here on Kitchen Sink Microscopy, and that's listening to the devil's advocate side of things. An alternate perspective, let's say.
Well, yeah, I've personally always considered it to be kind of like one of the core tools in the debate tool chest. You counterbalance whatever argument you're presenting with the opposing view, and kind of weigh it and contrast it and things like that. That's pretty important.
Yeah, we invited an anti-vaccination person on and had a bit of a debate and a back and forth. And while we didn't necessarily change either's mind, we strengthened our critical thinking skills. We gained an insight into how the other person thinks. At least I hope that's what he took away from it.
Yeah, I would hope so. And it's certainly in the debate sense, especially pseudo public debate forum like what we do here on YouTube and other places on the interwebs. I would hope that such conversations would bring people who may be kind of on the fence, maybe not know what to think, bring them into some kind of or enlighten them to a new way of thinking. You know, that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah. So you might be astounded to learn that there's actually a pretty big movement of people saying that you should not play devil's advocate. You shouldn't even bring that up because,
What
well,
the, why? What, I mean, again, going back to it, it's like a huge component of debate that, and if you ever take a debate course or something in school, that sometimes you have to take a side that you don't even believe
exactly.
and present it, because
Yeah.
that teaches you things. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't see how you can learn how to accurate or effectively debate somebody without at least practicing that from time to time. Uh, and so I'll tell you where a lot of this comes from. It's people getting their feelings hurt by having their views challenged by somebody that may not even hold the opposing view. They feel like it's a pessimistic thing, that they're just trying to be brought down or something. But
Well, but if everything's all rainbows and sunshine and unicorns and stuff, like, I, I, I don't know. I think ideas should be challenged. I think you can't possibly conclude that what you believe is legitimate unless it's withstood challenge. If it hasn't, you know, just individually, then I don't see how you can legitimize a way of thinking, a belief system, if it hasn't undergone that. And oh wow, okay, I've got so many ideas, but you probably do too. So I'll let you kind of like roll with what you have to say.
yeah, I mean, so there's ways that I can see their point. Um, there's some gray areas, just like anything. You know,
Yeah.
there's certainly situations where it isn't really necessarily helpful or even kind to take devil's advocate, and that's in cases where somebody has been like personally hurt by uh, you know, a clear and intended attack or something. You know, like an actual like cut and dry instance of racism, for instance. You don't need to be like, you know, trying to justify the other side of that. However, I don't think it's uh, unrealistic to try to dive into what that person's thinking, why they're thinking that way, you know, and try to understand where it's coming from. Not so much to, you know, have any effect on you one way or the other, but rather to engage that person in the future from a different tactical standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Because taking the adversarial stance probably doesn't do you a lot of good if you're trying to make a change in somebody's belief system or mindset. In fact, it actually probably reinforces it.
Yeah, there
Better
have been
to
studies that show
I,
that.
yeah, I consider it kind of like a logical, or yeah, logical Aikido, I guess.
Yeah,
Like, you have to take a different tactic. But that's a good point. Hmm.
I mean that's
I,
largely why I tried very hard uh, to refrain from being a little too harsh and overbearing with the anti-vaxxer guy, because um, I didn't want to reinforce his beliefs. I wanted to try and find, a, you know, those little cracks in the foundation that I could get into and pour some understanding into them. You know,
yeah. Well,
um,
and keep in mind too, in a public forum, you're not just having a discussion with one person, it's the world,
mhm.
especially on YouTube, the internet, things like that. That conversation isn't just between the three of us. It's between everybody. So the way you present the arguments, the way you present yourself, that kind of thing, the way the opposition presents themselves, that influences other people. So I think it's important to realize that and consider that in a discussion. We're no longer, it's not really the town square where there's only like a couple people there having a discussion. This is global now. So yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the articles that I've read on it are usually based around issues of race. And so like I said, I can see a little gray area there where, you know, it probably isn't helpful to so I'll just give you for instance, like one of the columnists was recounting one of his experiences where some guy waited in line 10 minutes just to tell him that his son couldn't get into college because he didn't have affirmative action on his side and stuff. And it was like, I mean, that's not a real devil's advocate though. Like that example.
No, that's
Yeah.
an anecdotal experience, and it's valuable. Like, people should consider those kinds of scenarios and those experiences.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's true.
what I mean is it's not really like it's not really painting a picture of an opposing scenario necessarily. It's more like just shifting blame.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, there's ways to. I mean, why don't we just take affirmative action or whatever as an example, like with school or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, so let's say you're the guy that was, you know, trying to get into school. You're a white dude or whatever. You're trying to get into the school, and you took the test, and you did pretty well, but you got turned down. And I was there in the room with you taking a test, and I am let's pretend not pasty white. I'm some darker shade of some sort, and affirmative action may or may not have influenced me getting in when you did not. We don't know each other's test scores, you know, for certain or whatever. We have our assumptions, but like, how would you? I mean, you would obviously feel frustrated, and that's understandable. And
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Oh, sorry, you had more to say. I don't want to interrupt.
right, well, I just wanted to say, obviously, you feel frustrated. So, how do you think you would want to address that, assuming that, you know, taking off the table the option of just not saying anything at all? Let's say you've got to say something, like it's burning inside you. You have to say something to me. What do you think is the most conducive way to address your frustrations to me, who honestly wasn't my fault whatsoever?
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be. I think honesty is the best policy, honestly, but it can be really heavy. It can be a lot to deal with. I think as a person that was rejected on the basis of skin color, I'd feel a little bit of resentment. And I would, I mean, you know, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, I guess, is almost kind of a devil's advocate kind of thing. If I were somebody who was accepted without meeting the base criteria, I'd feel a little slighted as well. Like, hey, this is racism of low expectations. You don't think that I'm capable of achieving these things, and therefore you give me preferential treatment. I'd be pissed too. So I think
Yeah,
both
no,
sides have a bit of legitimacy of being pissed at that.
yeah. I mean, so that's actually a good point. So maybe you would approach me and say, "Hey, just curious, how'd you do on that test?" You know, something that's not combative. It may be a little bit prying, but at least it's uh, friendly.
Well, yeah, and I think it should be friendly, because we shouldn't be fighting each other on superficial criteria. People should be free to discuss their differences without fear of conflict, like violent conflict or something like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's really important. And it's actually very beneficial. In fact, I would say that would go further to racial discrimination than anything else. And Daryl Davis, I'm sorry, I'm invoking Daryl Davis yet again, but
The
he's an
50th time.
example of how that actually works, like why that is a good way to do things.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so affirmative action it's a good and bad thing. It's a gray area. It's it's definitely giving people a leg up that have been over time, disadvantaged in a variety of just a skein of disadvantages that all kind of work in whatever mystic magical ways they work for each individual person that comes across a different barrier.
Yeah.
So
And
it's absolutely a good thing in that manner.
yeah.
But what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm all for helping people overcome their any kind of hurdles they have to overcome because of past issues or present challenges. But I think it has to be done carefully.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's almost like a completely different episode right there, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that's so huge.
I mean, to me, the devil's advocate standpoint would be that, in this hypothetical scenario, you've got, let's say it's a small school, you've got 100 seats in the class. And obviously, if you have this quota where a certain amount of non-white people have to be accepted in, regardless of their scores. I mean, obviously their scores probably play into it as far as like, if 200 black people apply to it, obviously they're going to whittle out some of them based on scores or whatever, but they've got to have a certain percentage, and this is a thing, like certain offices and, corporations or whatever have race quotas, which is,
that's a whole different
yeah,
topic right there. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like there is a legitimate reason to feel slighted when that's not benefiting you, even though it's a system intended to counterbalance, these disadvantages that are very real. They're disadvantages that were put in place, and you're not even actively participating in propagating, right? But
Yeah.
still, you're suffering as a result of creating that handicap to help someone else up. So do you feel frustrated at that? I mean, I could see that, right?
Yeah, totally. I absolutely could as well.
So
Um,
that's where empathy falls off for some people, because they say, boo hoo, you're white, you have it easy automatically because you're white. And
well, that's
they aren't
racist
listening.
too, isn't it?
It is, but
Uh,
they're not listening to the devil's advocate side of view, or point of view. Everyone has a legitimate gripe in this situation.
yeah, and I would say that certain uncontrollable conditions, that skin color, genetics, country of origin, or whatever, like those things do play a part, but they don't embody who you are as a person. You're much more than that. And to reduce it to that is well, I got a lot to say about that, but maybe I'll leave it alone. But I think it does a disservice to those people who follow that, um, ideology, I guess. Hope to serve. Teach a man to fish kind of thing. So yeah, but getting back to the devil's advocate thing, whew, there's a lot going on there. I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
I mean, I don't think it's right to just tell everyone like, hey, it's, you know, taboo. Like, don't bring up this opposing argument, because I can totally see how you would look like an asshole being like, oh, hey, I feel like I've been disadvantaged because of this affirmative action. And it's like, well, yeah, we don't have all the same disadvantages because of our color. And that's a shitty thing. Like,
yeah.
obviously in a perfect world that wouldn't have been an issue to begin with. And everyone would have just been equal from the beginning of time, the way it should have been. But
Yeah,
it's not that way, unfortunately. So
but well, and you know, thinking about it, that actually kind of made me consider some different things. That looking at it from such a superficial angle, like skin color or national origin or something, well, that ignores all the other bullshit reasons people have been oppressed or mocked or bullied or whatever. You know, I got glasses. Oh, nerd, you're a nerd because you got glasses and you know stuff. You know, like what about that? That's as every bit legitimate as something else that another person has gone through. And there's probably worse stuff.
ooh.
People who are overweight or something, they go through a lot of bullshit.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate to the nerd thing. 'Cause I was called a nerd as well. And yeah, in the beginning, that definitely beat me down. But I feel like I emerged stronger from it. And I think there's a lesson to be learned in that, you know, what you choose to do with the adversity you're faced with, you know, how you let it shape your character has a lot to do with what you come to expect as far as being treated in a certain way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're like, woe is me, I was called a nerd all my life and I had it so hard, my self-esteem was low, I really need someone to, you know, pay for my college for me and let me get a leg up on things because I had it so hard. Or you could be like, you know what, I'm going to show you how cool it is to be a nerd because I'm smart and I can get into college based on my, you know, scholarship, you know, my aptitude for learning or whatever. You know, I can take that and parlay it into success later in life. And you know, those are two different, that's a fork in the road that you choose pretty early on, but you can always jump over to the other road, you
Well,
know.
yeah, and things, it isn't, reason isn't black and white. Like it's not like it's a pessimistic world or an optimistic world. There's either darkness and Cthulhu or rainbows and unicorns. Like it's kind of all over the place. Yeah, because I went through the same kind of thing, and I would say that the challenges that I faced, the bullying and all the stuff that I had to deal with growing up, um, fortified me. Like, and it kind of like honed my skills. If I didn't have to go through that, I wouldn't be the person I am today. Yeah, yeah. I call myself an idiot, but you know, I can do a lot of stuff. I've rebuilt engines and built stuff and done everything.
I've always
And
described you as a Renaissance man. You
yeah, and if I were not a nerd, I would not be that. Like I wouldn't have to rise to the challenge. And I think that maybe coddling people and um, you know, trying to give people a pillow to land on, like, might actually be detrimental to their progress.
Mhm.
It's the same thing with like a workout, you know, you're trying to build muscle and stuff. You don't just like sit on a couch and eat potato chips. No, you break yourself so that you can become stronger.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how my upbringing was. And I don't resent it for 1 minute. In fact, I appreciate it. This has gone down a completely different path, but I think it is relevant.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is like, meeting those challenges is what makes you stronger and more capable. I don't know. Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that I think there's a wrong way to come at the devil's advocate stance, but I don't think it's ever wrong to consider that stance. It just needs to be presented. Well, I mean, it should be presented tactfully, just like anything else, you know.
Yeah. I mean, a devil's advocate argument is generally used to provide like balance to a discussion, especially one that where all parties kind of like lean one way or the other. You kind of throw out, hey, what if, or what about this thing, and challenge people to think, because that challenge is what yields the truth, I guess, of the argument.
Yeah.
And it makes people who are hard set in their ways like question things like, whoa, wait a minute, I never thought about that. And it brings up new ideas, and that's good. Like, it's totally a good thing.
So there was another thing I read about, and that they've done studies that show that that's actually not the case. Like, people, when faced with devil's advocates, don't actually, like, it actually drives them further into their own beliefs, and that they are hypothesizing that that's because typically when you take the stance of devil's advocate as opposed to an actual dissenter, like you're stating your opinion rather than a hypothetical opinion, people recognize that difference in conviction, I suppose, and that actually changes the way that it sways them. Like, they're less likely to give any credence to the devil's advocate. They're a little more likely to give credence to the person that genuinely believes something opposite that they do. But in both situations, they tend to like not think fondly of that person.
Yeah.
And then there's the case where a lot of people see through the thin veil of using the devil's advocacy as this kind of cloak to pretend that it's not really their opinion when it pretty clearly is. So they really don't like that, because not only do you think opposite them, but you're pretending that you don't, but you still want to talk about it.
I could see how someone would see that as a little disingenuous. Yeah.
It is, and I think that's one of the wrong ways to go about being the devil's advocate. Either own your opinion, or, you know, genuinely try to challenge the groupthink, you know.
Yeah. I honestly, I wish like more people would take a debate course in school, understanding how valuable the devil's advocate position is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like science. Science isn't like, oh, well, wait, science isn't like a consensus necessarily. It's a process. But it doesn't come from the standpoint of, we know what's right, and this is it. These are the facts, and done. It's an ever evolving kind of thing, constantly challenging itself, questioning itself, testing and reevaluating things. The point is to figure out how things work, and such is debate. You know, the human condition. Like, we don't know anything, but we think we know. But religion, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think
So I mean, I never took debate, but I took a a pretty significant amount of logic courses and critical thinking courses when those were still actually a thing that you could take in college. Um, I'm dating myself maybe, but I really learned the value of well, I mean, you realize when you start studying it that how can you ever really know if you've got the right answer if you haven't even considered the alternative explanations, you know?
Yeah, actually, you should weigh the extremes against each other, and
Yeah.
somewhere in between is something close to the truth, and probably not the truth, but close.
Yeah, there was
Um,
some big corporate broker firm or something where they would have a meeting, and when they would like unanimously decide to go a certain direction, they would all force themselves to take the opposing argument, craft a really strong argument. They'd take like a day or two or whatever to prepare these arguments, and they would come and try to convince each other that what they decided to do was stupid, you know? And
wow, that's awesome! Like,
yeah,
what a great idea!
yeah,
And
like
here's the
it's
thing,
role
like,
playing. You just role play the opposition to see how strong your argument is.
and in doing so, you strengthen your own point of view, or maybe you might change your mind, and changing your mind can be a good thing
Hmm.
if the facts bear out a differing point of view. Because here's the thing, your ideas aren't always correct, no matter how strongly you believe in them. If you believe super strongly in your beliefs, if your beliefs emotionally affect you, it might be time to question what you believe and why.
Hmm.
And so I think it's good to challenge yourself, because I think debate, discussion, arguments, and different things like will bear out the truth at the end of the day. um you know I think facts overcome superstition and bullshit. I think the weight is heavily on the facts.
Yeah.
um and most people are receptive to facts, maybe not in the here and now. Like the anti-vaxxer we talked to, yeah, okay, he's very standoffish in the moment, but maybe your discussion with him made him think about things. Maybe you thought about things. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you really engage it and give the other side an open ear, like I really hope that anti-vaxxer did what I did and read all of the sources that I provided to him as I did with all the sources he provided, because whether or not he understands it all or whether or not he's receptive to it, at least reading over it puts it in the back of your brain, and it's strengthening that critical thinking muscle. Even if you go into the gym and you're just starting out and you're lifting 5 pounds, you're not doing a whole lot, but you're doing something.
Yeah.
You're getting it started. You're starting the process with baby steps, and nobody's gonna take your side after one debate. Like,
No, not at all.
if
No.
they are, they're pretty pliable, and they're probably just going to go back
Yep.
to whatever they were thinking before, or some third alternative way of thinking of things. Just
Exactly.
it's obviously not like a one-time shot at changing someone's mind, but if you craft a good argument, if you are able to avoid ad hominem, which I'll admit I have a hard time with.
No.
I'm trying though. I'm getting better. I'm getting better.
It is tough because sometimes you get emotionally invested in things and
And
emotions come out.
sometimes enough brick walls in a row, and you do have to kind of be like, bye, Felicia,
Yeah, yeah,
but
exactly.
because
But here's the
you
thing.
don't want to waste time either, but
Think about this. This is kind of my take on things. Like, a public argument or discussion, I kind of have a problem with the term argument because it's taken on like this other meaning where it's like a adversarial yelling match. Like that's not what it historically was. It was a conversation with differing views, and yeah, but the discussion wasn't between you and the anti-vaxxer necessarily. It was between the two of you and everybody else. And so you may not change one person's mind, but through that discussion, you could change 100 people's minds.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important when we have discussions to realize the broader implications of the things that we talk about, that it's not just between you and the person you disagree with, it's between you and everybody else. And you might change people's minds you don't even know. And so consider that, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe in season 2 we should try, like an occasional segment the way we do with lightning rounds, where, we take a topic that we might be opposed on,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of, arguing from our own perspectives, we force ourselves to each play devil's advocate.
Oh, wow, that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the important thing, actually, that's a really good idea, because taking the stance of devil's advocate kind of makes you have to analyze the opposition's view. And in so doing, you kind of like think deeper about subjects, not just like, oh, I believe this thing. No, you have to actually craft an argument, a compelling argument, to contradict your own self. And, oh man, I gotta say, everybody should do that. Because
I think it'll be an entertaining show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, because we disagree on a few things, but we can have a conversation about stuff and not get angry at each other. It's a more matter of discussing the topic at hand. And that's where devil's advocate does come in handy. Like,
and if you're the devil's advocate, people often, I think people often hate the devil's advocate because they don't ever get fired up, because they're not taking their own stance. They don't have an emotional investment in it. Mm-hmm. They just come at you with different opinions, and it's firing you up because you're arguing for your own thing. If everyone was just like, hey, we don't agree on this, let's flip sides and each try to argue for the other thing.
Yeah.
Maybe there'd be a little less emotion in that. I don't know.
Well, and I think the Spock angle of things, like having a little bit of logic, a little bit of emotion, is good. Mm-hmm. Control in all regards. They both provide a beneficial component of a discussion and an analysis. But yeah, that'd be really cool. Like, yeah, I'd like to hear what people have to say about that. Do you want to see that? Because I'm all for it. Yeah. Like I'm completely capable of arguing stuff that I don't even believe in. So
it's fun, actually.
Yeah, it totally is, and it enlightens you. Because again, it goes back to the whole thing. Like you don't know everything, and seriously, if you think you know everything, if you think you have all the answers, you absolutely do not. You're totally wrong. It's kind of the whole thing. Like if you think you're insane, you're probably not. So yeah.
So if you're insane, just tell yourself you're insane and poof.
Yeah. But if you're insane, you'd never think that. You'd think, oh, I'm totally normal.
Oh, by the way,
I'm butchering people and chopping heads off with fire axes.
I should shout out to one of our fans. Here's another giant beer that he always likes to comment on the size of my beer. And I try to be modest about this these giant bottles that I have, but it is what it is.
You can't do anything about bottle anatomy. Oh man. I so I just I want to get your take on what you kind of think about this, because I haven't heard anything about the whole like devil's advocate being a bad thing. It kind of sounds a little bit Orwellian to me, like don't question the official narrative, nothing to see, move along. Like
basically that's it. It's I mean, it tends to be coming from a social justice warrior point of view where, I mean, I talk about this in our very first minute microscopy. I call this hipster humanism. They take this stance that their particular form of humanism is the only correct way. There can't possibly be another way to approach being a good human being, and that is a dangerous way of thinking, because automatically you're shutting out the gray and just seeing in black and white right there.
Yeah, and ignoring like the fact that maybe one, you could be wrong. Two, there's more than one way to do things. And that three, most people are good and they just have differing ways of approaching things. And that, if you want to, I don't want to go into the whole like convincing people of things, because I think that's maybe not the right direction to go. But
I am a big fan of always thinking of a better way to do something. Always trying to.
I am too. Yes.
always try to improve yourself, improve the tasks that you're doing, whatever it is. Always be thinking innovation. Mm-hmm. And going back to the earlier discussion about racism, like there's not one way. I mean, this is when you're talking about defeating an ideology that's passed down generation to generation, that is no small task.
Oh no.
I mean, it is not easy by any means. It's maybe not even possible, like with the tools in our tool belt now, but that's why we need to innovate. That's why we need to keep thinking about it.
Well, and again, that's why we have to have conversations.
Yeah.
Like even uncomfortable conversations.
Especially.
Yeah. Because those are the ones that are actually going to yield fruit. Oh God, I'm going to back to Daryl Davis. But you should challenge yourself, and if you really believe strongly in things, put your money where your mouth is, and try to make a difference. Be the change you want to see in the world, and he's done a lot in that regard. I mean, how many racists have you changed? Not you, but you, the audience. I would ask.
I mean, as far as I know, 0, but it's not going to stop me from trying, But
yeah, I would try too, because I think because the way I gotta. That's a whole different tangent, as far as like what makes somebody a race or something like that. And I think that,
right, yeah. Well, so here's the thing. Not only do the aggressors need to look at, become introspective and look at how they might need to change, people that are transgressed upon also should, they don't necessarily need to, but they should strive to take a look at how they've reacted to that. Going back to the nerd example, like you could either let it control your life, or you could take control and use it to strengthen your position, So like take the power out of the aggression. That's all within the, that ball is in the court of the person being transgressed upon.
Oh yeah. It's the whole like ideological Aikido thing.
Yeah. And so like just recently I spitballed this idea about the way that we approach racist people, because nobody wants to hear how much of an asshole they are. You know, even if they know it deep down, what they are usually open to is somebody sympathizing with them or seeing the hurt. Because I mean, let's face it. I mean, like you said in the poly episode, jealousy is fear turned inside out, and anger is pain turns inside out. I mean, that part right there. Anger is pain turned inside out means that these people who are lashing out are hurting inside
Yeah.
somewhere, somehow. Something is in there. They're in many ways a victim too, even if what they're doing is 10 times shittier, 100 times shittier. They're still victims, and they shouldn't be ignored. And I think that racism is as much a disease as alcoholism is, where it's a behavioral trait that's passed down. You see your dad drinking a bunch, you drink a bunch. You see your dad calling people the N-word, you do it. But there's people who break the cycle of alcoholism. Why can't there be people who break the cycle of racism?
Ooh, man. Wow.
Like, it's not an impossible feat. It's everyone says, oh, it's a passed down trait. There's no way to defeat it. It's just a cascade. It's a waterfall. We can't fight it. Sure, you can. You just
Yeah,
gotta,
exactly. Like punch a Nazi and you can just forget about him after that.
yeah. You
Like,
just
no, you have to follow up. No, that's a good point.
And you know what? Not every alcoholic turns around. Some of them succumb to the disease.
Yeah, and you have to actually be willing to accept that you can't change everybody's mind because everybody's circumstance is different. And talking about racism, it's a perceptual thing.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
the battle is not going to be like zero sum. You know, like it's not like we're going to eradicate racism any more than we're going to eradicate alcoholism.
well, and the isms and stuff like that. I take a little bit of offense to, well, not offense, I guess. I take issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
That one thing is different than another. It's bigotry. It's some sort of internal bias against a particular arbitrary trait that doesn't actually matter. What does melanin matter in somebody's life? Like, it doesn't matter. Where you come from doesn't matter. Your socioeconomic status doesn't matter. What matters is your mind, the content of your character. That matters.
Mm-hmm.
But people are superficial. And, Neiman Marcus is a good example of that. Like a ripped up t-shirt for $1,700. Why would anybody buy that? Like, I don't know. Shoes that look like they've been shit upon. I have no idea why somebody pay $1,000 for that. But, people are stupid. And they're stupid when it comes to judging other people. And they judge other people superficially. And we shouldn't. We should look at people as individuals and not prejudge people.
Yeah.
And we do.
But
We're all guilty of that.
yeah, but you know what I was talking about with, treating racism as if it were alcoholism, treating it like something that happened to them. It's not their fault that they became that way, but they can change. That is like an ultimate devil's advocate position.
No, that's a good point, because if you think about it, a kid that grows up in the deep South who's, well, I mean, I don't want to like pick and choose, but let's say like some white kid who is biased against black people, and their family is like very much against black people. They think they're stupid or whatever. And that kid was brought up in that environment. Like, what chance do they have? They're not given an equal footing to begin on. They began completely tilting over the precipice. And if you're going to judge them like people who have started off on equal footing, well, that's unfair. You have to assume that those people haven't been given a fair chance a fair shake. And they don't see things completely objectively. And neither do you, by the way. Not you, Casey. But you, the viewers, like the world at large. So don't be so judgmental of people who haven't had all of the tools or all of the experiences that everybody else has had. Like, yeah.
Well, the episode we did called Moral Combat with Uncle Tip and God and Mind State, we talked about a lot of these things. Uncle Tip mentioned he came across a guy that had never met a black man before in this day and age, you know? So it's like these experiences are not homogenous, you know, like
No.
what you might see as common sense is completely foreign to somebody else, you know?
Well, yeah, because you can't take your own experience and apply it to somebody else. Like, oh, of course, I've had this experience, so of course you have too. Like George W. Bush, remember gas $4 a gallon? That's news to me. You know, you can't take your own experience and assume everybody else has had the same and judge them based on that. You have to judge them based on their own experience. And unless you can empathize and have a conversation with them, you're never going to know. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I mean, we could go 3 hours on this, but
yeah.
Maybe we should try to keep it concise and just open it up to the viewers and give us your feedback on your ideas of devil's advocacy and for that matter, why don't you tell us what you would like to see different about this show, because we're open to change. We want to hear the devil's advocacy. We want to hear what's right and what's wrong. So,
yeah, and give us some new ideas. Like we're all completely willing to explore those ideas.
Yeah, like should Eric shave his head because it's really so much awesome looking?
Well, I do have to have a haircut, but
trying to reconcile this baldness thing.
Well, you can have some of my hair. I've got plenty of it. Yeah, I'd like to hear what people have to say. I mean, I had like a lot more thoughts, but like you said, it could have gone on for like 3 hours. So I think it's a good point to end on. And yeah, I'd like to hear people's views.
Yeah. So leave some comments. Don't forget to subscribe. Smash that bell so you know when we put out a new episode. And we're not even going to take a break. We're just going to jump right into season 2 and keep those deep sink dive-ins going on. So stick around. It's going to get better from here.
Oh, yeah. And check out the song on the way out. And yeah, I think that's a good point to end on. So keep the conversation going and have a good night, everybody.
Or don't have a good night. I mean, I'm just being the devil's advocate.